When I was about 11, 12 years old, I watched The Wedding Planner for the first time. It was one of my favorite films growing up as a kid, and best believe it made me briefly, for a little moment, consider a potential career as a wedding planner. That, of course, didn't pan out because I immediately realized that my brain couldn't keep track of minute details like Mary Fiore's did, unless it was details about nerdy things like books I was reading, anime I was watching, a show I was obsessed with. You get the gist. Younger Noria at this point hadn't clocked that I had ADHD, but I just knew my career as a wedding planner was going to be a bust, which also meant that when I got around to reading the Nora Roberts series about a group of friends who had a wedding planning business together, I was in no way roped into thinking it was a viable choice for me. All of this to say that as a child, I watched The Wedding Planner a boatload of times. I swooned over Matthew McConaughey's character and thought he and Jennifer Lopez were perfect for each other and would be together forever and ever. I haven't done a recent rewatch for this series of videos I've tagged Romcom Gander, thanks to my very good friend Holly, who named the playlist. Let's just say I spent the almost 2 hours of runtime for this film screaming at this film that features a lying, cheating, piece of shit love interest that gaslights not one but two women, and that this damn film wanted us to and ooh and ah over, when honestly, Mary would have been better served just ending up with Fran. But before I decide to tear Matthew's ass a new one, you know how we do it. A synopsis for those who have either never seen the film before, or it's been so long that they don't remember it, or just want to listen to me yap. And don't worry, if you just want to skip to the part where I share my thoughts on the film, use the timestamps to skip right over. I wouldn't mind. And with that said, the synopsis of this mess of a film. The Wedding Planner starts with a cute sequence of a young Mary Fiore, played by Jennifer Lopez, who is playing with her Barbie dolls and is organizing an extravagant wedding in a dollhouse with Barbie and Ken. Please take note of the dollhouse, as we will come back to it in a bit. Anyway, as a child, Mary turns a doll over to tell her that she's the luckiest girl in the world. This scene then transitions to adult Mary, who is now a full-time wedding planner, repeating the exact same line to her latest client, a bride who's suddenly grown cold feet just before she's to walk down the aisle. Mary, ever the charmer and the professional, talks the bride to be into swooning at the news that her soon-to-be groom is currently ecstatic at his unbelievable luck that she chose him and is willing to marry him, a line that cools the last of her potential bride's nerves, and which, just like with the dollhouse, we will come back to in a bit. Anyway, Mary steps out of the dressing room, handling all the problems and issues that pop up as she makes her way to the main auditorium where the wedding will take place, with a panache that screams, "This woman is a professional." I mean, we don't see her sweat at all. She's beautiful, she's confident, tracks down and sobers the drunk father of the bride with ease, and as she does her work with a flair that is, to be quite honest, enviable to anyone that is watching her, the wedding guests who are watching her are convinced that Mary must have quite the romantic life as a wedding planner. Except they are wrong. Her nights are spent alone, eating dinner with wine whilst watching television and prepping for the next day, and when she's done, she turns in for the night. Now, the film tries with the mood lighting and the song to make this look sad and lonely, but sorry, I don't see it or buy it, because at least she has her peace. A situation that will soon fly out of the window when she meets cheating as Steve and Alex Karev. But I'm jumping the gun. My bad. Anyway, next day, Mary's playing Scrabble with her dad and his friends when her father hits her with the, "I found you a man who has agreed to marry you." No, this isn't me joking. This was legit the line her father said as he goes in to bring in said man. It's Alex Karev, or sorry, as is known in this film, Massimo Lazzenti, a guy that she had met back when they were kids and her dad had taken the family home for a vacation to Italy. Apparently, he ate mud when they were kids, but looks quite decent now as an adult. Until he opens his mouth on their first meeting and tells her that the last time he saw her, she was scrawny and ugly and her head was too big for her body. Oh, also he wants 3 sons and a garden of tomatoes. As you might expect, Mary adioses her way out out of the room, she's got better things to do with her time, namely how she's going to convince her boss Jerry to make her partner. Jerry is hesitant at first, but Mary makes her pitch, pointing out that she's miles better than all the other wedding planners that Jerry employs, rakes in way more money than they do. Plus, if she's able to secure and execute Fran Donnelly's upcoming society wedding, then Jerry has to agree. Otherwise, she will start a rival wedding planning business. Jerry reluctantly agrees, but that then means that it is up to Mary to secure the contract to plan Fran's wedding. She meets Fran at another wedding that she's planned, and Fran is impressed at the smooth way in which Mary reads the best man's speech. And Mary is, of course, able to ride the wave and secure the wedding by winning Fran and her parents' approval. As she informs her slightly ditzy colleague Penny Nicholson, played by the ever-brilliant Judy Greer, Mary gets her shoe heel stuck in a manhole cover as she struggles to remove the shoe because, damn it, that's a new Gucci shoe. A distracted taxi cab driver brushes against the dumpster, which then comes careening towards Mary, who is seeing death fast approaching, but also clearly wants to make heaven with a new Gucci shoe in hand. Just as the dumpster was about to make contact, in flies her knight in shiny armor, Steve Edison, played by Matthew McConaughey, who tackles her to safety and was also able to rescue her shoe. Something that Mary notes before promptly fainting after thanking him. When she wakes up, she's in a hospital being tended to by children. Turns out the children are also patients since Steve is a pediatrician. The film establishes that Mary is clearly very attracted to Steve, and even Penny, who was on the phone with Mary when she almost got turned into rude pancake, remember, is just as stunned at Steve's quite pretty face when she shows up to get Mary at the hospital. And being the amazing colleague and friend that she is, scores Mary a date with Steve by inviting him to come with them to the park to see an outdoor movie, after which she ditches them so Mary can get some alone time with Steve. They sit and chat. Mary is bemused at Steve's act of tossing away the colored M&Ms and leaving only the brown ones because the brown ones are closer to the color of chocolate, and so he figures that they have less artificial coloring, which... This man is a doctor, Euro. This man is a doctor. Anyway, something else we will get to later on in the film. Mary reveals that she plays chess at the YMCA and invites Steve to come see her play in a moment of vulnerability. She asks him to dance and he joins her, swaying to the music from 2 Tickets to Broadway, which is the adult film that they are watching, by the way. Anyway, they dance, get caught in the moment, and just as they lean in to kiss, it starts to rain heavily, ruining the moment as they run off and leave the venue. Of course, this just means that Mary spends the next couple of days all moony to the point that Penny notices, and so does Fran, who hears the good news that Mary met a guy who she seems to like very much. Fran's all ready to help her snag the guy, of course, because Fran is a decent person like that. Except a couple of days later, whilst waiting on another of her clients who she'd signed up for dance lessons, Mary runs into Fran, who is at the very same dance studio with her fiancé, as they want to take dance lessons in anticipation for their wedding. Her fiancé, who turns out to be Steve, who Fran calls Eddie. Mary is shocked. Fran has to step out briefly and pushes for Mary to dance with Steve so as not to hold up the rest of the class. As they dance, Mary, who is rightfully furious, asks why an engaged Steve will go to the movies with her, which leads to this asswipe talking about himself in third person, trying to give her the runaround, not really addressing the fact that he did go to the movies with her and did almost kiss her. After she leaves the dance studio, Mary informs Penny of her plan to give up the wedding, but Penny points out that this is her career and she's a professional and there is no way she should allow Steve ruin her chance at making partner. Mary agrees to continue planning Fran and Steve's wedding. And part of that involves Mary, Fran, Steve, and Fran's parents all heading to a potential wedding venue in Napa Valley, where Massimo shows up and declares to everyone that he is Mary's fiancé. Mary is horrified, Fran is impressed, and Steve believes he is vindicated. Smug son of a bitch. Anyway, whilst horseback riding through the estate, Fran's mother singing startles the horse, and Mary, who isn't as adept a rider as everyone else, loses control of her horse, which creates a scenario where once again Steve rescues Mary, and which gives him the chance to mock her for condemning his actions whilst she too was engaged. This film makes me rage. Back at home, Mary confronts her father, who is delighted at the news that she's engaged. But she pops that bubble real fast, saying that she is not engaged to Massimo and that all of this is her father's fault for trying to set her up with the boy in the first place. Her father apologizes and tells her that all he wants is for her to be happy and to find love. He tells her that she might think his relationship with her mother was perfect, but what she doesn't know is that they had an arranged marriage and their love grew over time. This news throws off Mary, who wasn't expecting it at all. At the park, which was to be a potential venue for their wedding, which Steve objects to, but which Fran is able to convince him about pretty quickly, Fran informs Mary that she would be gone for a week on a business trip, and so she wants Mary and Steve to continue wedding preparations in her absence, since she doesn't want to move the wedding date. The time alone gives Mary and Steve the chance to apologize for their angry outbursts to each other at Napa Valley, as Mary had declared that Steve and Fran were not going to last. Which, girl, why are you apologizing for telling the truth? Anyway, she also tells Steve that she and Massimo aren't engaged any longer, and Steve apologizes for having called her a bitter, cynical woman. Just in case you all haven't guessed yet, the film made me, personally, even more bitter and cynical of a woman. With the air cleared between the two of them, they go shopping for flowers and run into Mary's ex, Keith, who it turned out had been her fiancé until she caught him cheating with Wendy on the night of their rehearsal dinner in her car. Wendy was his high school girlfriend. Anyway, clearly running into her ex sets Mary off, and she breaks down in tears as she gets drunk. Steve tries comforting her and gets her back inside her apartment as she slowly sobers up, basically telling her that she's miles better than Wendy. He leaves shortly afterwards, only to come back to try and confess his feelings for her. Thankfully, Mary informs him that she loves and respects Fran too much, and she has zero interest in paying any attention to anything he has to say besides his tux measurements. Fran makes it back for the wedding, but then expresses her fears about Steve, as she isn't sure that she's in love with him, and the thought that he would be the only man she would ever be with terrifies her. And that is when Mary breaks open the exact same speech she gave the bride at the start of the movie. Remember, I mentioned it about Steve being in absolute awe that Fran chose him. It's enough to soothe Fran's fears, and she agrees to continue with the wedding. At the birthday party of one of her dad's friends, Massimo shows up to propose to Mary, complete with a remodeling of the dollhouse she used to play with as a kid. And Mary, most likely thinking of her father's words, agrees, with nary a hint of joy to be found on her face. Time passes as Fran and Steve and Mary and Massimo prepare for their weddings. On their wedding day, which perfectly coincides, Mary, after setting things up for Fran and Steve, leaves Penny to coordinate the rest of the wedding as she heads off to City Hall to marry Massimo in her own low-key wedding. Meanwhile, Steve meets with Fran to ask her what they are doing, which is when Fran realizes that this garbage man legit is breaking up with her on her wedding day. But Steve spins it around to ask Fran if she loves him, saying that if she does, he would marry her right this instant. Fran, however, gets cold feet, and when she worries about what to tell the guests, Steve tells her that he would handle it. He puts her in a cab and sends her off on their honeymoon alone. Except he doesn't handle it, because when Penny comes running, hyperventilating that the bride has left, and Mary, who is the wedding planner and would know what to do in the situation, is at City Hall getting married herself, Steve immediately leaves his wedding without informing his guests, including Fran's parents, about the change, and races off towards City Hall. Meanwhile, at City Hall, just as Massimo and Mary are about to get married, Mary's father stops the ceremony and points out that he doesn't think this is what she wants, and is instead a case of her doing what he wants because she wants to make him happy. Mary, however, insists to her father that life is not a fairy tale, but she thinks Massimo is a good man and marrying Massimo is the right thing to do. With his piece having been said, her father leads her back to the wedding. Sometime later, Steve arrives to find Mary's dad, Mary's dad's friends, and Massimo standing outside City Hall. Turns out that the wedding didn't hold after all, to Steve's delight. He informs Mary's father that he's in love with Mary and asks where she is. Massimo says that she's at the park and drives Steve using his scooter with the just married license plate to the park where another outdoor movie is showing. Steve walks in on Mary, who has learned his habit of separating the colored M&Ms from the brown ones, and smiles. He asks her to dance, they dance, and kiss afterwards. The end. Like I said at the start of this video, this whole movie is a gaslighting mess. Matter of fact, it's a cheater's manual, because not only does this film have Steve actively gaslight both Mary and Fran into the bullshit that is his indecision and desire to absolve himself of what is a very clear case of him cheating, there's the bit with Mary's dad and Massimo that frustrates me to no end. But let's start with Steve. That scene where they are in the dance studio and Mary asks him clearly why he agreed to dance with her when he was engaged is such a study in gaslighting that he had me screaming. He talks about himself in the third person, distancing himself from the situation, while simultaneously making excuses with words like, Steve likes the movie, Steve had a night off, Steve said a movie sounds good, plus he got an invitation, to try and dismiss her valid point that he was cheating. Then he tries to divert the attention away from the fact that he is a cheater by bringing up the fact that she had told him she liked the way he smelled before she fell unconscious when he rescued her, and then wraps it up with an attempt to trivialize the entire experience by saying that it doesn't mean anything, which is a lie, because this piece of shit comes back to her apartment moments after she was just sobering up from being drunk off her ass to ask her if she ever thought about that night at the park, on the same night she had just told him about her ex-fiancé who cheated on her. Do I appreciate the fact that Mary immediately shut it down by telling Steve that she respects and loves Fran too much and she's not going down that path with him? Yes, I do. But do I hate that this film never actually addresses the fact that Steve has been emotionally cheating on Fran from the start of the movie when he appears, and him then trying to turn it around to Fran not being in love with him was a way to absolve himself of the guilt and blame that should rightfully be placed at his feet because this man is a cheating piece of shit? Yes, I do. What is worse is that he is manipulating the entire situation to have Fran be grateful to his ass for walking away from her on their wedding day when once again she doesn't have the full picture or information. She's going on their honeymoon, and when she comes back and she run into Mary with Steve again, that is when she's going to realize that her piece of shit ex-fiance had fallen in love with their wedding planner but spun things around to make it seem that the reason why he was putting a stop to their wedding was out of concern for her and because he was trying to help her. And gods, I want to barf. This man makes me sick. I cannot believe that this film had a woman on the team. Pamela Falk, I have got questions, a ton of them for you, starting with, what the hell is this? How do you write Mary to be a strong, competent, professional woman, which is what she had been characterized as up until we get to Napa Valley? And then this miscreant called Massimo shows up at her job while she's talking to her client and claims to be her fiance, and she does not immediately have security escort him out. He talks over her and she just keeps quiet and bears it. How does that work? That scene makes no sense to me, and I'm of the firm opinion that the only reason why it was written that way was to give Steve the ammunition he needed to get on a high horse and declare that Mary is also a cheater, which, even if it was that she didn't feel comfortable for some weird, inexplicable reason, immediately cutting Massimo to the quick right there and then when he saddled her with an engagement that she'd never agreed to. Hell, he had never even proposed to her at that point. She had only met him once prior. When they were kids does not count. But let's just say that she didn't want to cause a fracas in front of Fran's parents. She couldn't shut up gloating Steve by informing him that she's very much not engaged to Massimo and she had only met him once in her life. She just kept quiet. And later, when they are both apologizing about the words they had said whilst they were at Napa Valley, she tells him that her engagement to Massimo is over. Not that they were never engaged in the first place. I feel gaslit by this film. This film is trying to manipulate me, putting in all this effort to try and get the audience to be in some way considerate of Steve as a love interest. And I don't buy that shit. Matter of fact, it's making me so pissed off because what? And yeah, I know some people find Massimo cute. I don't. Justin Chambers is amazing as always. And Alex Karev would always be my second favorite character from Grey's with the character arc he underwent. Great stuff. And for context, I stopped watching Grey's after season 10 and Christina left. So in my head, Alex is still the decent ped surgeon at Grey Sloan Memorial. But as I was saying, Justin Chambers is amazing and he plays Massimo being quirky and heartfelt so well, but being heartfelt doesn't give you justification to run roughshod over someone else's desires and wishes, which is what Massimo does with Mary. And the fact that her father had the audacity to try and put a stop to her wedding at the ending, talking about your eyes are sad and I think you're doing this for me, is yet another way this film is trying to mess with our heads, because up until that point it had been team love will come eventually. She had been sad since the engagement. What suddenly changed? He had basically worn down her defenses with the story he told her about her mother and how his love with her grew slowly and wasn't instantaneous like Mary had thought. Which, side note, let me get this straight. It took her mother taking care of her father whilst he had scarlet fever for him to appreciate her, to appreciate his new bride. It took her having to care for him to start to get over the other woman he wanted to marry instead of her. Like what? But back to Mary. My girl was played by one cheater, her ex, Keith, only to fall in love with another cheater. And I want to give her a hug because Mary Fiore deserved better than this. She should have married Fran. And they would have been great together, because please tell me how Mary, who is only known Fran for the couple of months that she's been planning her wedding and has been working with her as a paid client, has more respect for Fran and her feelings than a shit-stained excuse of a fiancé. Like, I'm tired. This film pissed me off so bad. The only good part of this film was the fact that they at least didn't have Mary and Steve kiss until at the very end of the film, and they just married license plates on the scooter that Massimo used to drive Steve to go see Mary, which had everyone thinking that Massimo and Steve were the ones that got married. Other than that, I was just a big ball of rage throughout. Of course, these are just my thoughts. Maybe you watched The Wedding Planner and had a much better experience than I did. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this so others can find my channel. Support me on Patreon if you can. If you can't, however, do consider checking out my other channels. I have a gaming channel and an ASMR channel as well, and both are linked in the description box if that sounds like the kind of content you might enjoy as well. Whichever the case may be, however, I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.